Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more amazing HFY stories. Hit the bell icon to get notified about our latest uploads. The fall asterisk asterisk. The sky over the small rural town was an ominous shade of deep purple as a violent storm surged, whipping the trees into frenzy. Lightning flashed, illuminating the landscape in quick, jagged bursts of blinding white. In the distance, the horizon shuddered with the roar of thunder, but the sound of the storm was nothing compared to the crack that split the air moments later, an explosive sound that carried the weight of something far more destructive than nature itself. In the brief stillness that followed, a falling object screamed toward Earth. A sleek, silver craft, too fast and too erratic for any human aircraft, cut through the atmosphere like a meteor. The object's hull was ablaze, trailing fire and smoke as it plummeted toward the ground. The town's only witness was Eli Carter, who had been experimenting with his drone prototype near a clearing just outside the town. Eli was hunched over his equipment, adjusting the drone's flight parameters when the sudden roar overhead startled him. His heart skipped a beat, and he looked up just in time to see the burning object hurtling downward. A burst of panic surged through him, and without thinking he sprinted toward the clearing, hoping to catch a glimpse of what was falling from the sky. The object hit the ground with an earth-shattering impact, sending a shockwave through the trees and sending debris scattering in all directions. Eli dove to the ground, narrowly avoiding the flying fragments of wood and metal. His heart raced. It was a crash, an alien crash. He had seen enough science fiction movies to know what this was, but he never thought he'd be the one witnessing it. The storm raged on, but Eli pushed forward, his breath ragged as he ran toward the source of the impact. The smoke had already begun to dissipate, revealing the twisted wreckage of what was once the craft. It lay in a crater in the earth, smoking and cracked but still oddly intact. Eli's pulse quickened as he approached. He had to know what was inside, but the risk was immense. He thought about calling the authorities, but deep down he knew he couldn't wait for them. This was his moment, the moment that could change everything. He approached cautiously, peering through the scattered wreckage. And then he saw it. Lying half buried in the dirt, her body strangely illuminated by a faint, almost ethereal glow, was a figure unlike anything Eli had ever seen. She appeared humanoid, but her features were wrong. Her skin was a smooth, translucent shade of violet, her long hair a silver cascade that shimmered even in the gloom of the storm. Her body was slender, but her armor-like exoskeleton, a fine latticework of metallic-looking fibers, was unlike anything Earth had ever produced. But it was her face that sent a chill down Eli's spine. Even in unconsciousness, there was an air of otherworldliness about her. Her eyes, though closed, held the remnants of a profound intelligence, an intelligence far beyond anything he had ever encountered. Eli moved quickly, assessing her condition. Her breathing was shallow and her pulse was weak, barely detectable under the cool surface of her skin. A jolt of panic shot through him as he saw the faintest trace of bluish veins pulsing weakly beneath her skin. But the worst part? Her heart. It had stopped. He wasn't a doctor, but Eli had seen enough movies, read enough books, and tinkered with enough machines to understand the gravity of the situation. Her life was slipping away with each passing second, and he was the only one who could do something about it. Eli pulled out his phone and quickly scanned the surrounding area, trying to figure out what he could use. He needed medical equipment, but there was nothing in his immediate vicinity. And then, like a spark of inspiration, he remembered the energy pack he had been testing for his drone, an experimental power source he had designed himself. The small, portable device could generate enough electricity to temporarily stabilize a system, if used properly. There was no time to waste. His hands shook slightly as he unzipped his backpack and pulled out the device. He rushed over to her, kneeling beside her fragile form. For a moment he hesitated, his heart pounding in his chest. What if she was dangerous? What if this was some kind of trap? But then he looked at her face again, her eyes still closed, her chest barely rising and falling. She was hurt, probably more than anything he could understand. Eli's fear gave way to determination. There was a chance he could save her, he had to try. He placed the energy pack gently against her chest, right where her heart should be. The device was an untested prototype and the risk was high, but it was the only thing he had. He took a deep breath, adjusted the settings, and then activated it. A surge of electricity pulsed through the device and into her body. The moment it made contact, something strange happened. Her skin tingled under his touch, a faint hum resonating through the air. Eli's heart raced as he watched, waiting for a sign that the energy was having an effect. The seconds felt like hours. Her chest rose slightly, then fell. Then it happened. Her body gave a violent shudder. Her eyes shot open, glowing faintly, a deep violet light that mirrored the luminescence of her veins. For a moment Eli froze, caught in her gaze. Her eyes were not human, there was no mistaking that. They held something ancient, something vast like the knowledge of entire galaxies, and they were focused entirely on him. Then without warning she gasped for air, her chest rising and falling rapidly as her heartbeat kicked back into rhythm. Her body jerked violently as if she were learning to breathe for the first time. Her hand shot up, reaching toward Eli, and with a strength that surprised him, she grabbed his arm, her grip firm but not hostile. "Who are you?" Her voice was raspy, like the first whispers of a storm, yet it carried an authority that sent a thrill down Eli's spine. Eli, overwhelmed and unsure how to respond, simply whispered, "I'm Eli. You were hurt. I think I saved you." She blinked, her eyes narrowing as if processing the situation. Her grip on his arm loosened, but she did not release him entirely. Instead, she studied him, scanning his face as if trying to determine whether he could be trusted. Then, as if hearing some distant call in the back of her mind, she spoke again, her voice softer now, "I am Kalina from the world of Vale. My mission must succeed." Eli's heart pounded in his chest as the reality of the situation hit him. She wasn't just any alien. She was a survivor, perhaps the last of her kind. And somehow he had become entangled in her fate. The storm raged on above, but it seemed to pale in comparison to the weight of what was happening now. The secret she carries ***. The storm howled above them, but beneath the thick canopy of trees, all was still. The winds, though fierce, didn't reach them. Eli sat on the ground trying to make sense of everything. His mind raced. He had saved her, Kalina, and in doing so had unwittingly thrust himself into something far bigger than he could comprehend. Kalina's grip on his arm remained firm, her hand cool but not cold, like the touch of someone who had been dormant for too long. She stared at him with those violet eyes, as if trying to decipher the mysteries of his existence, or perhaps seeing something in him that he couldn't yet understand. The silence between them was broken only by the occasional crack of thunder in the distance. Eli wasn't sure what to say. He had questions, so many questions, but there was no time to ask them. "Not yet." "You saved me," Kalina said again, her voice still hoarse but growing steadier by the moment. She slowly lifted herself into a sitting position, her body shifting with an otherworldly grace despite the clear exhaustion in her movements. "I didn't have a choice." "You were dying," Eli replied, his voice shaky. He couldn't believe he was talking to her, let alone that he had managed to bring her back from the brink of death. The technology he had used, his experimental power pack, was designed for small-scale applications, not to revive something so alien. It should have never worked. Kalina's head tilted slightly as she observed him, her expression unreadable. "You are human," she stated, as if testing the word out on her tongue. "Yet you possess knowledge beyond the ordinary." Eli flushed at the remark, unsure whether it was praise or something else entirely. "I'm an inventor. An engineer. Nothing special," he said, avoiding her penetrating gaze. "I work with machines. And well, I've always been fascinated by the unknown." Her eyes softened as if she understood. Then her gaze flickered down to her chest, where the energy pack was still pressed against her skin. The device's glow was dimming now, having discharged its power into her system. Kalina gently removed it from her body, holding it in her hands like a strange artifact. The violet veins beneath her skin pulsed with a faint, rhythmic glow, slowly becoming more stable as her body adapted to the influx of energy. She seemed to be recuperating faster than any human would. "You did not ask for this," she murmured, her voice distant. "But you will have no choice. It has already begun." Eli felt a strange unease wash over him. "What do you mean?" he asked, his throat tight. "What has begun?" Kalina's gaze met his once more, but this time, it was tinged with a deep sorrow. "My mission," she said simply. "It is the last hope of my people." She took a slow breath, and the air seemed to hum with some kind of gravity. "I came to Earth to protect something that could change the course of the galaxy itself." Eli's heart pounded in his chest. His mind struggled to keep up with the implications of her words. "You're saying your people are gone? But what's this thing you're protecting?" She closed her eyes, her face creased with pain. "They're all dead, Eli. My planet Vale was destroyed. A powerful race of invaders came and we couldn't stop them. They ravaged my world, slaughtered my people, and took what was most precious to us, what was most precious to me." Her hand trembled slightly, and Eli noticed it wasn't from weakness. There was a quiet fury there, something far deeper than he could understand. I was entrusted with the task of protecting a key, she continued, her voice quieter now, tinged with regret. The key to stopping them, to preventing their spread across the stars. But I failed. I was hunted. I barely escaped, carrying the key with me, and now it is on Earth, hidden in plain sight, waiting to be found. Eli's mind spun. A key? To stop an invasion? His mind tried to process it, but it was too much. Wait, what kind of key? And how is it here? What is it? Kalina's lips parted as though she might speak, but then her eyes flicked to the trees, narrowing as though sensing something far beyond the physical world around them. Her body tensed, her senses heightened, and for a moment, Eli could almost feel the electricity in the air shift. They're coming, Kalina said, her voice urgent, barely a whisper. The invaders? Harmithians. They are already on Earth, searching for me. Searching for the key. Eli's stomach twisted in knots. This was happening. It was no longer just some outlandish story. This was real. What do we do? Kalina slowly rose to her feet, moving with fluidity that betrayed the strength in her body. Despite her earlier injuries, she stood tall, her eyes scanning the surroundings with intense focus. We hide. We gather what is necessary. And we prepare. The Harmithians will stop at nothing to retrieve what belongs to them. Eli stood too, though he felt a surge of panic rise within him. The Harmithians? Alien invaders? He couldn't fathom how something so monumental had slipped under the radar. He had heard nothing about extraterrestrial threats, no signs of alien life, nothing. And then it hit him. The storm, the crash, Kalina's presence, it was all connected. This wasn't some random event. This was the beginning of something much larger. He was in the middle of it, whether he liked it or not. Kalina turned to him, her expression serious. Eli, I know this is beyond anything you've imagined, but you must understand, this is not just about survival. It's about the fate of your world. Earth is not as safe as you believe. The Harmithians have already infiltrated your systems. They know more about your world than you realize. The weight of her words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Eli swallowed hard, his mind racing to catch up. Infiltrated? Oh. Who? Kalina stepped closer, her voice lowering to a whisper. There are humans who have already made deals with the Harmithians. Governments, corporations, secret organizations. Some believe they can control them, but the Harmithians will destroy them all when they're done using them. Eli's eyes widened, his heart pounding in his chest. This was bigger than he could have ever imagined. His mind was still reeling, but one thing was clear. Kalina had to be telling the truth. No one would make up such a detailed story, not with the urgency that radiated from her. Then we have to stop them, Eli said, his voice firm despite the fear gnawing at him. But how? Kalina's gaze softened for a brief moment. I cannot do this alone. I have to trust you, Eli. The key is here, and you must help me find it before the Harmithians do. Eli didn't know if he was ready for this, but something inside him stirred. There was a sense of purpose, a responsibility that came with her words. He didn't know how to stop an alien invasion or protect a key of galactic importance. But one thing was certain. He wasn't about to turn his back on her, or on the world he had spent his life trying to protect. We'll figure it out, he said, taking a deep breath. Together. And as the storm continued to rage around them, they prepared for the dark road ahead. The key's secrets ***. The night grew darker, the storm still raging overhead, but beneath the canopy of trees, the world had taken on an eerie stillness. The only sounds were the distant rumbles of thunder and the occasional crack of branches as they swayed under the weight of the storm. Eli stood beside Kalina, both of them staring out into the forest, as though the very trees were hiding secrets that could change the fate of the universe. Kalina had insisted they move from the clearing, away from the wreckage of her ship. It was too risky to stay there. Even with her heart restarted, she wasn't fully recovered, and she knew the Harmithians could sense her presence. They were relentless and every minute counted. We need to get to shelter, she said, her voice urgent but composed. Somewhere remote. Where they won't find us easily. Eli nodded, glancing at his backpack, which contained the energy pack he'd used to restart her heart, along with a few tools, a flashlight and some food he'd packed earlier. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. There's an old cabin not far from here, he said, thinking back to his childhood. My family used to use it for weekend getaways. It's isolated. No one would know we're there. Kalina's eyes flashed with curiosity. Lead the way. As they made their way through the dense woods, Eli couldn't shake the weight of everything that had happened. His mind was still reeling from the revelations, alien invaders and interstellar war, a key of unimaginable importance hidden somewhere on Earth. How had all of this remained hidden from the public? Were there others like Kalina stranded here hiding from the Harmithians? And what exactly was the key she had mentioned? The questions pounded in his mind, but he knew better than to ask them now. Kalina was still recovering and he had no idea how much energy she had left. If the Harmithians were already on Earth as she claimed, there was no telling how soon they would arrive. The key, whatever it was, had to be found, and quickly. When they reached the cabin, it was nearly midnight. The structure was small and old, weathered by time but still standing strong. Eli unlocked the door and they stepped inside. The air was musty but the place was dry, and it offered them shelter from the storm. Kalina immediately collapsed onto one of the old wooden chairs, her body seeming to relax for the first time since Eli had found her. He quickly rummaged through his backpack, pulling out a blanket to drape over her shoulders. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice softer now that they were inside. Kalina nodded, though her face remained tense. "I will recover. But I need time to regain my strength." Eli sat down across from her, his eyes not leaving her for a second. "You said something about a key. What is it? What makes it so important?" Kalina stared at him, her violet eyes gleaming in the dim light. "The key is not a physical object. It is a piece of technology, ancient and powerful, that holds the ability to access a higher plane of existence, a dimension of energy that could tip the balance of power in the galaxy. It is said to be able to disrupt entire fleets, to rewrite the laws of space and time. If the Harmithians gain access to it, they could bend the universe to their will." Eli swallowed hard. This was no ordinary artifact. It was a weapon that could change the fate of entire civilizations. "You said it's on Earth," he said slowly. "But where? How do we find it?" Kalina's expression grew distant, as if she were searching for something deep within herself. "The key was hidden by my people, placed in a location where only those with the proper knowledge could find it. I was meant to protect it, but my world was destroyed before I could complete my mission. Now it is up to you, Eli." Eli's mind was spinning. He had no experience in galactic matters, no knowledge of ancient alien technology. He was just a man, a simple inventor, who had somehow been thrust into a situation far beyond his understanding. But Kalina had trusted him. She believed in him. And despite the overwhelming odds, Eli couldn't help but feel a growing sense of responsibility. "Where do we start?" he asked, his voice steady despite the storm of thoughts in his mind. Kalina looked up at him, her eyes piercing into his soul. "The key is not bound by the rules of this world. It is linked to energy, to the very fabric of the universe. You may not realize it, but you already have the tools to find it. Your mind, Eli, it is special. You have an affinity for technology. That is why the energy pack worked on me. It recognized your potential." Eli's breath caught in his throat. He had never considered himself special. He was just an inventor, a tinkerer who loved machines. But Kalina's words made him think. Maybe there was something more to his abilities. Maybe the connection between him and Kalina, between the alien technology and his own, wasn't just a coincidence. "What do you mean, my mind?" he asked, his curiosity piqued. Kalina's gaze softened, but there was a certain urgency in her voice. "Your brain, Eli, is wired in a way that allows you to understand and manipulate complex systems. When you activated the energy pack, your mind interfaced with the device. You didn't just use it, you understood it. The Harmithians have no such affinity. They rely on brute force, on their advanced technology, but you—" She paused, her lips curling into a faint smile. "You are different." Eli felt a strange sense of pride, but it was quickly overshadowed by the realization that this new knowledge came with an immense weight. The fate of the galaxy rested on his shoulders and the clock was ticking. The Harmithians were out there looking for them and they wouldn't stop until they had what they wanted. "So, how do we find the key?" Eli asked again, his voice firm now. "How do we use my abilities to locate it?" Kalina stood slowly, her movements still stiff but more fluid than before. "We begin by tuning into the energy signatures that bind this world together. The key's energy is unique. It resonates at a frequency that only those who are attuned to it can perceive. You will need to unlock that perception within yourself." Eli nodded, unsure of what that would entail but willing to try. "How do I do that?" Kalina placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch cool but grounding. "Close your eyes, Eli. Focus. Let your mind expand beyond the physical. Feel the hum of the earth, the flow of energy that connects all things. When you do, you will hear the key's pulse." Eli hesitated but then did as she instructed. He closed his eyes, blocking out the sounds of the storm and focusing on the rhythm of his own breathing. At first it was just silence. Then, ever so faintly, he began to feel it. A pulse, A hum, not from the world around him but from something deeper. Something ancient. His heart seemed to sync with it, beating in time with the energy that radiated through his body. The pulse grew stronger, louder. And then, suddenly he saw it. A flash of light, an image, distant but clear. A map of some kind, with a glowing point at its center, a location that was so familiar, yet so alien. His mind grasped it, but before he could focus on the details, the vision faded. He gasped, opening his eyes. "I felt it," he said, his voice breathless. "I felt the key's pulse. It's real." Kalina nodded, her face a mixture of pride and relief. "You are ready, Eli. The key is close. We will find it. Together." But as Eli looked into her eyes, he knew one thing for sure. They were no longer just running from the Harmithians. They were hunting something far more dangerous, and far more powerful, than either of them could have imagined. The hunt begins ***. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside the cabin, the air had shifted from a tense, uneasy silence to something more purposeful. Eli had felt the pulse of the key, a presence that tugged at the very core of his being, and Kalina's steady gaze told him that their next steps were crucial. The Harmithians were coming, and they wouldn't stop until they had found what was hidden. Kalina stood in front of the small window of the cabin, her violet eyes scanning the dark, rain-drenched landscape as if she could see through the walls of the forest. "We cannot stay here much longer," she said, her voice cool but firm. "The Harmithians will be able to track us if we remain in one place for too long. The pulse you felt, Eli, it is a beacon, a signal to them." Eli was still trying to process the enormity of everything. He had always believed in technology, in machines and gadgets, but now he was caught in something far beyond his comprehension. Kalina, an alien warrior from a destroyed world, had trusted him with the survival of her people, and the fate of Earth itself. "What's the plan then?" Eli asked, his voice steady. "How do we move without them tracking us?" Kalina turned back to him, her face illuminated by the flickering light of a lantern. "We'll have to travel underground, through old pathways that are forgotten by most. There's an old network of tunnels beneath this area, built by humans long before your time. It should shield us from their sensors." Eli frowned, trying to understand the significance of what she said. "Underground tunnels? Do you mean, like bunkers?" Kalina nodded. "Not bunkers. These tunnels were built by an ancient civilization long before your people even existed. They were abandoned when your ancestors came to the surface. But they still exist. They stretch beneath the earth, and if we follow them, we'll be able to move undetected." Eli was still grappling with the idea of ancient civilizations, alien invasions, and hidden tunnels beneath his feet. The world as he knew it had shattered in an instant. "So, we go underground and try to stay out of sight. And then what? How do we find the key?" Kalina's eyes softened, her expression growing more distant. "The key is not just an object. It is a connection, a conduit. If we follow its signal, it will lead us to its final location. But the Harmithians will know where it is as well. It's only a matter of time before they track us." Eli exhaled, trying to steady his thoughts. He had no idea where to even begin looking for ancient tunnels or how they would avoid detection. All he knew was that they were being hunted, and every second spent in the open brought them closer to the edge of discovery. The Harmithians were ruthless, and Eli could only imagine what would happen if they were found. "We need to move," Kalina said, pulling him from his thoughts. "We cannot waste time." Eli grabbed his backpack, slinging it over his shoulder, and followed Kalina out the door. The rain pelted them as they made their way to the edge of the forest, where Kalina led him to a hidden entrance. It was disguised, almost perfectly blending into the side of a large rock formation. But when Kalina placed her hand on the rock, a low hum reverberated through the air, and a small section of the stone wall shifted, revealing a dark opening. "This is it," she said. "The entrance to the tunnels?" Eli hesitated, glancing back toward the distant cabin. He had no idea what lay ahead in those dark corridors, but something about the silence of the forest felt wrong. Every instinct in his body told him that they weren't alone. Kalina stepped into the darkness without hesitation, and Eli followed. The air in the tunnel was damp and cool, and the walls seemed to pulse with a strange energy that sent shivers down his spine. The ground beneath them was uneven, and the only light they had came from the faint glow of Kalina's hand, which shimmered with a soft violet hue, casting long shadows on the walls. The deeper they went, the quieter it became. The sound of the storm outside seemed to fade into nothingness, replaced by the soft echo of their footsteps. Eli could feel the tension in the air. This place was old, ancient even, and it felt like a labyrinth, endless, winding, with no clear direction. "Where do we go from here?" Eli asked, his voice low. Kalina's eyes glowed faintly as she scanned the path ahead. "Follow the energy," she said, her voice reverberating in the narrow tunnel. "The key's signal will guide us." Eli closed his eyes for a moment, focusing on the pulse he had felt earlier, the low hum that resonated deep within him. It was faint at first, but as he concentrated, the pulse grew stronger. He opened his eyes and motioned ahead. "This way." Kalina nodded. "You're more attuned to it than I thought." They moved quickly, following the pulse deeper into the tunnels. Eli's senses seemed to sharpen, as though his connection to the key was growing stronger. It was strange, but it felt natural. He could almost feel the key like a magnet pulling him toward it. It was as though the key itself was aware of their presence and it was responding. But the deeper they ventured into the tunnels, the more uneasy Eli became. There was something off about the place, an unsettling quiet that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Every now and then he would catch a glimpse of movement out of the corner of his eye, but when he turned there was nothing there. Kalina seemed to sense his growing tension. "They're close," she murmured. "We're being tracked." Eli's heart pounded in his chest. The Harmithians were already here, weren't they? He had no idea how they had found them so quickly, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. "How do we stop them?" Eli asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Kalina's eyes flicked toward him, her face grim. "We can't outrun them forever. But we can delay them. If we can reach the chamber where the key is hidden, we might be able to trigger a protective barrier. It's ancient technology, designed to prevent the Harmithians from gaining access." Eli nodded, even though he wasn't sure what that meant or how they would manage it. The tunnels had grown narrower, the walls more jagged and uneven, as though they were entering an older part of the network. The pulse of the key was growing stronger, more urgent. "We're almost there," Kalina said, her voice strained. "Just a little further." They rounded a bend in the tunnel and suddenly the air shifted. The pulse of energy was overwhelming now, filling every inch of the space around them. Eli could feel it vibrating through his bones and he knew they were close, so close. And then, just as they reached the end of the tunnel, the sound of footsteps echoed from behind them. Eli's heart skipped a beat. The Harmithians had arrived. Kalina turned to him, her expression hardening. "Stay close. We cannot let them reach us." Eli nodded, his mind racing. There was no turning back now. The key was within reach, but they weren't the only ones hunting it. The Harmithians were here and they were ready for a fight. They stepped into the chamber, and the ancient technology within began to hum with energy. But would it be enough to keep them safe? The heart of the key ***. The chamber was unlike anything Eli had ever seen. The walls seemed to breathe with a strange energy, pulsating in time with the vibrations that hummed through his body. It was a vast, open space, with smooth stone pillars rising from the ground, each etched with intricate symbols that glowed faintly in the dark. At the center of the room, resting on a pedestal of shimmering black stone, was a glowing object, no larger than a human heart, but radiating a powerful energy that filled the entire chamber. Kalina stepped forward, her eyes locked onto the glowing object. "There it is," she said quietly, her voice filled with reverence. "The key." Eli stood frozen for a moment, unable to tear his gaze away from the artifact. It seemed to call to him, drawing him closer with an irresistible pull. The power that emanated from it was unlike anything he had ever experienced. More than just a machine, more than a weapon. It felt alive, conscious even, as if it had its own will. Kalina moved toward it, but just as she reached the pedestal, Eli caught her arm. "Wait. How do we use it? How do we make sure the Harmithians can't get it?" She turned to him, her expression tense. "The key is protected by ancient technology, by the very energy that powers it. But it requires a living connection, someone who is attuned to it. That's why you felt the pulse. You are the one who can unlock its true potential." Eli swallowed hard. His heart was racing and his palms felt clammy. He had no idea what she meant by being attuned, but he understood one thing. If he was the only one who could unlock the key's power, then the Harmithians would stop at nothing to take it from him. And that meant there was no turning back. Before he could speak, the chamber door slammed open with a deafening crash, and a group of Harmithian soldiers poured into the room. Tall, imposing figures in sleek black armor, their faces hidden behind angular helmets. They were unlike anything Eli had ever seen, but their presence was undeniable. The air grew thick with an oppressive, malevolent energy as the soldiers advanced, their weapons drawn and pointed directly at Kalina and Eli. "Step aside," a voice commanded, cold and menacing. It was the leader of the Harmithian unit, his voice amplified by a helmet comm. "The key belongs to us." Eli felt his pulse quicken. They were here just like Kalina had warned. The Harmithians had found them, and now they were closing in on their prize. Kaylina didn't flinch. Instead, she stepped in front of Eli, her posture unwavering. "You will never have it," she declared, her voice low and full of defiance. The Harmithian leader stepped closer, his eyes narrowing as he assessed her. "You are not strong enough to protect it," he said. "This planet, this world of primitive humans, is no place for your kind. The key will be ours, and with it we will reshape the galaxy." Eli's heart raced in his chest as he looked at Kaylina. He could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the strain of the past few days taking its toll. She was strong, but even she couldn't fight all of them. Not in this condition. "We need to do something," Eli whispered urgently, his mind spinning. He had no weapons, no plan, but the key was their only chance. Kaylina turned to him, her eyes filled with a mix of urgency and trust. "Eli, you must connect with the key. You are the only one who can unlock its power. It will protect you." He hesitated, unsure of what exactly that meant, but there was no time to question. The Harmithians were closing in. He stepped forward, moving toward the pedestal with shaky hands. The soldiers watched him closely, their weapons trained on him, but none of them moved to stop him. It was as if they knew that once the key was in his hands, the battle would already be decided. As Eli reached the pedestal, the energy surrounding the key pulsed stronger, almost as if it recognized his approach. The light from the object intensified, bathing the room in a blinding glow. He felt it again, the pull, the tug of something deep within him. It was calling to him, demanding to be touched, to be understood. He extended his hand. The moment his fingers brushed the surface of the key, a surge of energy coursed through his body. It was overwhelming, more than anything he had ever felt in his life. His vision blurred, his body trembling as if he were connected to the very heart of the universe itself. The symbols on the walls flared to life, glowing brighter than ever before. The air crackled with raw power, and Eli's mind was flooded with images, ancient alien landscapes, battles between worlds, and a vision of the Harmithians themselves, ruthless and unyielding, bent on conquest. But then, as suddenly as it had begun, the vision stopped. Eli staggered back, his head spinning, but in his hand was the key. It had changed. No longer was it just an object, but a pulsating core of light, a beacon of power. He felt it thrumming inside him, connected to him in a way he couldn't fully comprehend. Kaylina's voice broke through his disorientation. "Eli, you have done it," she said, her tone filled with awe. "The key, it's responding to you. You've unlocked its potential." The Harmithian leader snarled, his patience wearing thin. "Enough of this. Kill them." At his command, the Harmithians raised their weapons, preparing to fire. But just as they did, the chamber seemed to shift. The walls began to glow with an intense, blinding light. The key, still glowing in Eli's hand, pulsed with a power that was both ancient and terrifying. Without warning, a shockwave of energy erupted from the key, expanding outward in a burst of force. The Harmithians were thrown back, their weapons flying from their hands as they were knocked to the ground by the sheer power. The entire chamber seemed to quake as if it were alive, and the air grew thick with the hum of ancient technology. Eli could barely breathe, the energy from the key overwhelming him. But he realized with a start that he was controlling it. The key was responding to his thoughts, his will. It was his power now, and the Harmithians had no idea what they were up against. "Stay back," Kaylina shouted, stepping in front of Eli to shield him. Her eyes burned with determination. This is no longer just a battle for survival. This is the future of the galaxy. The Harmithians scrambled to regain their footing, their weapons flickering as they tried to react. But it was too late. The key had chosen its bearer, and it was not going to let them take it. Eli focused on the key, and as he did, the chamber responded, the energy field strengthening, pulsing in time with his heartbeat. He could feel the Harmithians pressing forward, but they were powerless to breach the protective barrier the key had formed. Kaylina's voice cut through the rising hum of energy. "Eli, you must use the key to send them away. Now." He nodded, despite the dizziness clouding his thoughts. He focused again, this time channeling the energy through the key, amplifying it. A beam of light shot out from the object, striking the Harmithian leader and knocking him off his feet. The remaining soldiers hesitated, their fear palpable. They had never faced an enemy like this. Kaylina turned to Eli, her eyes filled with a mix of pride and urgency. "Now," she said, "we end this." With a final surge of energy, Eli directed the key's power outward, creating a pulse so powerful that the Harmithians were pushed to the farthest corners of the chamber. The room shook and the walls seemed to bend under the force. The Harmithians, now disarmed and weakened, had no choice but to retreat, leaving the chamber in chaos. As the energy faded, Eli collapsed to his knees, exhaustion overwhelming him. Kalina rushed to his side, her hand on his shoulder. "You did it, Eli," she said, her voice soft but filled with admiration. "The key is ours." But as the dust settled and the Harmithians retreated, Eli knew one thing for certain. The war for the key had just begun. The price of power ****. The glow of the key faded, leaving the chamber in a heavy silence. Eli sat on the cold stone floor, his chest rising and falling with labored breaths, his body trembling from the sheer force of the energy he had just channeled. Kalina was kneeling beside him, her hand steady on his shoulder, her gaze unwavering as she watched him closely. "You've done it, Eli," she said quietly. "The Harmithians are gone, for now." Eli could feel the weight of her words sinking in, but they barely registered. His mind was still reeling from the power surge. The key. He had controlled it. But at what cost? His body felt drained, as if the very energy of the artifact had taken something vital from him. His muscles ached, and his vision swam, like his body was unprepared for the strength he had unleashed. How did I do that?" Eli murmured, still in disbelief. I didn't even know how to control it." Kalina's expression softened, her eyes glowing faintly in the darkened room. "The key responds to your spirit, Eli. It's not just about control, it's about connection. The bond between you and the key is unlike anything the Harmithians could ever comprehend. That power, it belongs to you now." Eli shook his head, trying to clear the fog that clouded his mind. "But why me? Why me? I'm just a guy. A normal guy from Earth." Kalina smiled, her lips curving into something almost akin to sadness. "That's what makes you different. Earth's people, your humanity, have a strength the Harmithians never expected. They believe they can conquer anything, by force, by technology. But they don't understand the one thing that makes you all-powerful, the heart. The human heart." Eli looked at her, still unsure of what she meant, but the conviction in her voice was undeniable. It felt like a weight pressing down on him, but he wasn't sure if it was the power of the key or the responsibility that now rested squarely on his shoulders. Kalina helped him to his feet, her grip firm but gentle. "We don't have much time. The Harmithians will be back and they won't stop until they have the key. We need to move, now." Eli glanced around, taking in the remnants of the battle. The Harmithian soldiers had scattered, but the room still pulsed with an eerie energy. The walls had cracked in places and debris littered the floor. The protective barrier the key had formed had left its mark on the structure itself. But there was something else, something in the air that felt wrong. The sense of victory was fleeting. "Where do we go now?" Eli asked, still trying to make sense of everything. "We need to find the heart of the key," Kalina said, her voice serious. "The key isn't just a weapon, it's a piece of a larger puzzle. There is a place where it can fully awaken its power, a place where it can finally seal the Harmithians out of our galaxy forever." "The heart of the key?" Eli repeated, his mind struggling to keep up. "What does that even mean?" Kalina glanced around the chamber, her eyes narrowing as if she were searching for something hidden in the walls. "It's a place of great significance. It's where the key's true purpose was sealed. We need to go there before the Harmithians can regroup. If they get to the heart first, everything we've done will be for nothing." Eli frowned, his mind racing. The heart of the key. How did he even begin to understand something like that? He had just learned how to hold the key without blowing up the planet. Now they were talking about unlocking some ancient cosmic artifact that could reshape the galaxy. It was all too much. "How do we find it?" Eli asked. Kalina's gaze shifted to the now dim key in his hand. "The key will guide us. But you must focus, concentrate on the energy inside you. The more you connect with it, the clearer the path will become." Eli closed his eyes, taking a deep breath as he tried to center himself. The power inside him still hummed, faint but constant, like a heartbeat that was both alien and familiar. He reached for it, letting it flow through him, trying to understand its rhythm. As soon as he did, a strange image appeared in his mind, a vision of a distant planet, its surface scarred and broken, like it had been through some kind of cataclysm. In the center of the planet was a massive, glowing structure, a temple perhaps, but its purpose was unclear. The heart of the key. He knew it. He didn't understand how, but he knew it was the place. "Where is this place?" Eli asked, his voice trembling. "It's far," Kalina replied, her expression grim. "But the key will show us the way. We just need to keep moving." The urgency in her voice snapped Eli out of his thoughts. There was no time to waste. The Harmithians wouldn't be gone for long, and the longer they stayed in this chamber, the more danger they would be in. Eli stood and followed Kalina as she led him out of the chamber, her movements swift and precise. They retraced their steps through the ancient tunnels, the walls now pulsing with a soft, steady light as if the key's presence was awakening something deep within the ruins. The air felt charged, crackling with an energy that had been dormant for eons. They reached the surface and the storm had died down, leaving the world eerily calm. The forest was quiet, but Eli knew that silence wasn't a good sign. The Harmithians were out there, regrouping, preparing for their next move. Kalina looked at Eli, her eyes filled with determination. We're almost there. The heart of the key is within reach. But the Harmithians will try to stop us at every turn. Are you ready? Eli's heart pounded, but he nodded. There was no turning back now. The key had chosen him, and with it, he had a responsibility he couldn't ignore. He wasn't just fighting for his own survival anymore. He was fighting for the fate of Earth, and the future of the galaxy. The journey ahead would be dangerous and they would face countless challenges. But for the first time since this entire ordeal began, Eli felt something other than fear. There was a fire within him, a sense of purpose that had been ignited by the connection he now shared with the key. And he would stop at nothing to see it through. Kalina turned, motioning for him to follow as she led the way into the night. The road ahead was unclear, and the danger was far from over. But together they would face whatever came next. And Eli would learn the true cost of power. The last stand ***. The night was still and oppressive as Eli and Kalina moved through the dense jungle, the moon casting long shadows across the rugged terrain. Every step they took seemed heavier than the last, as if the weight of their mission was bearing down on them. The path ahead was unclear and the danger, ever present. But Eli couldn't afford to think about that now. The vision of the heart of the key, the place that held the ultimate power to stop the Harmithians, burned bright in his mind. They had to get there. How much farther? Eli asked, his voice breaking the tense silence that had settled between them. Kalina paused for a moment, her sharp eyes scanning the area around them. We're close, she said softly. The heart of the key isn't just a place, it's a convergence of power. We should be able to feel it once we get closer. Eli nodded, although he didn't feel anything yet. The energy from the key still hummed faintly within him, but it felt distant now, like it was calling from somewhere far away. A strange emptiness lingered in his chest, and he wondered if the power was taking more from him than he realized. Every time he used it, the connection between him and the key grew stronger, but the more it grew, the more it seemed to demand in return. The sudden crack of a twig snapping underfoot jolted him out of his thoughts. Eli looked around, his heart racing. Kalina's hand shot out, gripping his arm, and she motioned for him to be silent. They both stood still, listening to the night around them. The sound of movement was unmistakable, heavy boots crunching through the underbrush, the unmistakable hum of Harmithian technology. They're here, Kalina whispered, her voice cold with resolve. We need to move. Eli felt a surge of adrenaline, and without another word, he followed her, trying to keep his footsteps light. The Harmithians were getting closer. They'd been tracking them for hours, no doubt using the key's residual energy to hone in on their location. The stakes had never been higher. The heart of the key was within reach, but so was the Harmithian army. They pushed through the jungle, the thick trees and undergrowth slowing their progress. In the distance, Eli could hear the whir of the Harmithian vehicles, the mechanical monsters that could track them down and destroy them in seconds. They couldn't outrun them. Not now. But they didn't need to. The heart of the key was their only chance. Kalina glanced back at Eli. We're almost there. Trust the key. Focus on it. Eli nodded, closing his eyes for a moment to center himself. He felt the faint pulse of energy within him, felt the key's presence like a heartbeat syncing with his own. He reached for it, pulling the energy toward him, amplifying it in his mind. The vision of the distant planet came to him once again, the glowing temple at its center, its purpose burning bright in his thoughts. When he opened his eyes again, the landscape around them had changed. The jungle was gone. Instead, they stood in a vast open plain, the sky above them streaked with swirling clouds and distant stars. In the center of the plain was a massive structure, an ancient temple, its architecture unlike anything Eli had ever seen. It was enormous, rising high into the sky with spires that seemed to reach out toward the stars themselves. The heart of the key was within. Kalina's eyes widened as she took in the sight. We've made it, she breathed. This is it. Eli didn't respond. His feet were already moving, the pull of the key guiding him forward. They walked toward the temple, its massive stone doors standing wide open as if waiting for them. The air around them crackled with the same energy that had filled the chamber where they'd first found the key. This place. This was where the power of the key could be fully realized. But as they neared the temple's entrance, the ground trembled beneath their feet. A rumbling sound echoed through the plain, followed by the familiar hum of Harmithian ships. Eli's heart sank. The Harmithians had found them. "We don't have much time," Kalina said, her voice urgent. "We need to activate the key, now." Eli nodded and held the key out in front of him, focusing on its energy. The closer they got to the temple, the stronger the pull became. It was as if the key recognized the place and it was calling out to something inside the temple. As they reached the base of the steps leading into the temple, Eli felt a sudden surge of power, an electric charge that shot through him like a lightning strike. Kalina grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the entrance. "This is it. The key is about to awaken." Before Eli could respond, a loud explosion rang out in the distance. The Harmithians were here. "They've arrived," Kalina said, her eyes dark with determination. "Eli, we have to do this now. Open the heart. Activate the key." He didn't hesitate. The energy in his hands surged, growing stronger as he focused on the temple. He raised the key above his head, and the moment he did, a brilliant light shot from the center of the temple. It enveloped him, and for a brief moment, he felt as though he were being torn apart by the intensity of the power. His vision blurred, and in the depths of his mind he saw something, an image of the galaxy teeming with stars and life. But it wasn't just any galaxy. This was the galaxy of the Harmithians' future, a future where they ruled every world with an iron fist. Eli knew the heart of the key wasn't just a weapon. It was the key to the very balance of the universe, capable of both creating and destroying. With one final, desperate push, Eli poured all his will into the key. And as he did, the ground beneath him exploded with light. The Harmithians, closing in on the temple, were stopped in their tracks as a shockwave of energy erupted from the heart. It swept over the plain like a tidal wave, knocking the Harmithian ships from the sky, sending them crashing into the earth below. Their soldiers were thrown back, their weapons disintegrating in the face of the key's power. Eli fell to his knees, the energy draining from him as the power of the heart consumed everything around them. Kalina was by his side in an instant, her hand steadying him as he gasped for air. "You did it," she whispered, her voice breaking through the ringing in his ears. "You've saved us all." But Eli couldn't speak. The power of the key had taken everything from him. He could feel himself slipping, the weight of exhaustion dragging him under. The battle was over. The Harmithians were defeated for now. But the cost had been high. Kalina's face was filled with both relief and sadness as she knelt beside him. "Rest, Eli. You've done what no one else could. You've changed the course of the galaxy." Eli closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the universe in his chest. He had fought for Earth, for humanity, and for something greater than himself. And in the end he had given everything to protect it. As the energy of the key continued to pulse through the heart, Eli felt the deep, resonating hum of victory, and the silence that followed. The galaxy had changed forever. And so had he. A new beginning ***. Eli's vision slowly returned, the blinding light from the heart of the key fading into a soft glow. His body felt like it was made of lead, each breath labored, each movement slow. He could hear Kalina's voice, but it felt distant, as though she were speaking from another world. "You're still with me," Kalina said, her hand gently resting on his chest. Her voice was calm, though there was an unmistakable edge of concern in it. Eli tried to open his eyes, but his eyelids felt impossibly heavy. Every part of him felt empty, drained, as if all the life force had been drained out of him. The heart of the key's energy had ravaged him. He had given everything, and now there was nothing left. But he wasn't alone. Kalina's hand remained steady on him, her presence grounding him. He focused on that, on the connection between them. The energy he had used, the force he had summoned, had irrevocably altered something in him, in both of them. He could feel her warmth, her strength, and through it, a new sense of hope began to rise within him. "You're safe," she said softly. "It's over. The Harmithians won't return." He tried to speak but found his throat too dry, his body too weak. All he could do was nod. His mind struggled to keep up, racing between fragmented thoughts. The Harmithians were gone, their ships destroyed. The galaxy had been saved, for now. He had done it. He had made the impossible possible. But at such a great cost. "Kalina," he managed to croak. His voice was hoarse, barely a whisper, but she leaned in close, her ear near his lips. He swallowed hard, trying to find the strength to speak. "What happens now?" Her hand tightened around his. "Now we rebuild." The Harmithians thought they could control everything, every planet, every life form. But they were wrong. You proved that. You proved that humanity, that Earth, has the strength to fight back. And now, others will follow? Eli's mind raced. The galaxy? It's yours to protect now, she said, her voice firm, resolute. With the heart of the key, with the power you wield, you can shape the future. But it won't be easy. The Harmithians were just the beginning. There are other forces out there who will try to take what you've earned. He nodded slowly. The weight of that responsibility was enormous, but it was a weight he now understood. He wasn't just the protector of Earth anymore. He was a guardian of the entire galaxy. The battle had been won, but the war, in a way, had just begun. There were so many unknowns, so many challenges ahead. And yet, for the first time, he didn't feel overwhelmed by it. He felt ready. The power inside him, the connection to the key, it wasn't just about destruction. It was about growth. About rebuilding what had been broken. He looked up at her then, his strength returning in small bursts as the energy of the heart began to settle. And you? Where do you go now? Kalina smiled faintly, her eyes shining with a quiet understanding. I go where you go, Eli. We're in this together. For a moment they simply sat there, their hands still intertwined, the weight of everything they'd been through pressing down on them in the best way possible. Silent, shared, and unspoken. They had both been changed by what had happened, and neither of them would ever be the same. But in this moment there was peace. Eli slowly sat up, feeling strength return to his limbs. His body still ached, but the strange emptiness inside him had been replaced with a new sense of purpose. The power of the key had nearly destroyed him, but now it felt like part of him, like a part of his own soul, had been reborn in its light. We have a lot of work to do, Eli said, his voice stronger now, the weight of his words setting in. But we can do it. Together. Kalina stood beside him, her hand still in his. Together, she agreed. They turned toward the temple, its ancient stone walls bathed in the afterglow of the energy the heart had released. Around them, the once desolate plain now seemed full of potential, fresh, untamed, but full of promise. There was still so much to discover, so much to rebuild, and so much to protect. As they walked toward the temple, Eli could feel the pull of its power once again. But this time it didn't overwhelm him. Instead, it was a steady rhythm, a constant beat that seemed to align with his own heartbeat. He was part of it now. And it was part of him. They reached the entrance and Kalina paused, turning to look at him. You're not just a man, Eli. You're something more. The heart of the key chose you because it knew what you were capable of. Eli smiled faintly. I don't know about that. I just wanted to protect the people I care about. That's what makes you special, she said softly. That's what makes humanity so dangerous. You fight for something greater than yourself. He glanced at her, realizing that for all the power he now possessed, it was the connection between them, and between him and everyone else, that would truly shape the future. His journey hadn't just been about defeating the Harmithians, or unlocking the heart's power. It had been about understanding what it meant to be human, to fight not for personal glory or conquest, but for something much more important. The people, the worlds, and the future that needed protecting. Eli stood in the doorway of the ancient temple, his hand on the cool stone, and felt the hum of the heart echo within him. He didn't have all the answers. But for the first time he was at peace with the uncertainty. He was ready for whatever the universe would throw at him next. With Kalina by his side and the key now a part of him, he stepped forward into the future. A future where Earth would stand strong, not just as a planet among the stars, but as a beacon of hope, strength, and resilience for all the worlds yet to come. The journey had only just begun. And Eli was ready to face it, no matter the cost. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.